Welcome to the Training for Translators podcast.
Do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job with our weekly episodes for ambitious freelance translators and interpreters.
Visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com to subscribe to our newsletter, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast.
Now here's your host, Corinne McKay.
Greetings, Training for Translators listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 11 of the Training for Translators podcast, in which we're going to talk about my ChatGPT use cases. Welcome to this first episode of the 2025 season. If you are listening for the first time, there are 10 episodes of the Training for Translators podcast waiting for you in your favorite podcast app that you could go back and listen to. Today's topic is based on a post that I published on my blog on December 3rd, 2024. If you'd like to read that post, just go to trainingfortranslators.com, click blog, and put any of those keywords, for example, ChatGPT, into the search box, or just scroll back in the blog post history and you'll find it there in December. I wanted to preface this by saying I went from being sort of the ultimate ChatGPT hater. Like, if it's not good for translation work, which I don't think it is, then it's really not good for anything. It's useless to me. To really opening my mind about the other potential uses of ChatGPT, which I have found several that are really, really useful to me, so much so that I had to pretty quickly upgrade to the ChatGPT paying subscription because I maxed out the features of the free subscription. Now, all of this has since been somewhat thrown into turmoil by the news in the past couple of weeks. I'm recording this on January 28th, 2025. The news in the past couple of weeks about the Chinese AI tool DeepSeek, which has apparently been available since around Christmas, but rushed onto the world stage as a potential competitor to ChatGPT. So I'm going to leave that analysis to the tech experts out there, but I'm just going to tell you a bit about how I have found ChatGPT useful. And before I get going on this, I want to acknowledge that people have a huge range of feelings about AI in general and about ChatGPT specifically. If you hate AI and don't want to read a word about it, my feelings will not be hurt if you stop here and pick up in a future episode. My feelings about AI boil down to a few things. Most importantly, I feel that it is a tool among others that I do want to know about and that I'm interested in using when it is helpful. I think personally, and I may be wrong about this, that we can now safely say that AI is here to stay. And I think the reality for those of us who work in any sort of technology-intensive profession, of which I would classify translation and interpreting as being fairly technology intensive. However we personally feel about major technological changes, I think that we have to either face the choice to get on board with them or accept that that may have a massive hit on our own business. So those of us who have been on this earth long enough to have lived through the transition to computers, which I did. So I'm 53 now. I, used computers throughout my life, starting, I think we had a computer programming class in elementary school, but it was really when I was in college and my first job out of college, so say my early 20s, when there was really the transition to websites and email versus, paper marketing materials and phone calls. And I remember seeing people who really resisted that transition. Like, if you want to talk to me, you can call me. And I think that those mindsets can hold out for a while. And honestly, they can hold out forever if you are willing to absorb the repercussions in your own life. But when we think about what it would be like to try to live in the modern world, for example, without using email or a cell phone, the only way people have to contact you is to call call you on your landline, then in one sense, I think those of us who grew up in the analog age would say, like, well, life rolled along just fine when the only way people had to contact someone was to call on the landline. But when you think about how jarring that would be in the modern world, and particularly the effect that it would have on your business, I think that is something to consider when you think about your own feelings toward AI. I will say there are things I hate about AI. The current environmental impact, the better to ask forgiveness than permission model of what I would consider copyright infringement that, OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT, essentially fed their model with all kinds of copyrighted material, only started paying for that in most cases when the media outlets involved objected to it. And then most of those media outlets went along with it, said, okay, you can just pay us now. I do realize that those issues are pretty nuanced. I'm going to talk later about a presentation that I watched on the environmental impacts of AI that mentioned that in reality, if AI's massive electricity needs end up driving the demand for more renewable energy, that could actually be a good thing. I will also say that I find AI next to useless for writing or translating from scratch. I find its writing style very robotic, and it makes a lot of mistakes that you don't even see because it sounds kind of smooth, and then you realize it's completely wrong. I do have the paid version of DeepL, which is an online machine translation tool, and I use it quite a bit for interpreting prep. When there are documents that I want or need to translate quite quickly, it really is the only option. But I never use AI to do a translation or a piece of writing from scratch. I will also say that although I have found various use cases for ChatGPT in my own work, my reaction when people say, but like AI is so great for automating boring, repetitive work, I'm sure it is, but nothing about my job is really boring or repetitive. And that's a lot of what I love about it. I gave the example before I myself started using ChatGPT of a use case I really would have loved. I was on the board of the American Translators Association for 7 years in the 20-teens, and we really could have used a tool for combing through large quantities of information. For example, if I could have said to ChatGPT, go through all of the records of the American Translators Association conference for the past 10 years. Make me a list of the conference locations, the dates, the registration fee, the hotel room price, other factors that we might have put in. And in the end, give me the number of paid registrants and the conference's total profit or loss. Something like that is a use case that I think would have saved perhaps hundreds of hours of human effort. So I always had that in the back of my mind. And then I attended the Tech Forward AI in Translation Summit. So for those of you who have never heard of Tech Forward, that's tech and then FORWORD, platform run by Josh Goldsmith online. And I will say that I pay for my own Tech Forward Insiders membership. I find it quite a good investment. And they did give me a premium ticket to the AI in Translation Summit as part of the compensation for a class I taught for them. And Josh Goldsmith and Nora Diaz organized that. And Nora Diaz has since taught a ChatGPT class for training for translators. And she is going to teach another one in March, which I'll tell you about later. But here we go on my change of heart. The beta version of ChatGPT came out in November 2022, and I honestly barely used it from that point until, let's say, late 2024. When I started hearing rumblings from people I trusted about specific ChatGPT use cases that I started to think, that could be perhaps useful for my work. For example, a couple of other translators who I think of as kind of my level of tech savvy told me that they found it helpful for complicated research questions. I'll give examples later, and of course, you always want to check the sources. Then, my own daughter, who is an engineering student and she is currently looking for a summer internship, told me that she used it for things like specific character count and tone instructions when she was writing things like cover letters or LinkedIn connection requests. So, for example, on the LinkedIn connection request, you can tell it has to be no more than 200 characters with spaces. You can write a cover letter and say, can you make this more formal? Can you make this less formal? But the real tipping point was when I was teaching a class for someone else's online training platform, not for training for translators. And the organizer came back to me with what I thought was a really fantastic rewrite of the title I had written for the session. And when I complimented that person on it, they said, "You should thank ChatGPT." And I thought, okay, I have to try this for myself. So along came Nora and Josh's Tech Forward AI in Translation Summit. And as I said, they did give me a free Power Pack registration as part of a class that I taught for them. 3 of my favorite presentations during that summit were Bex Elder, who presented how to use AI to help you create great content faster, Veronica Hylack, who presented on the environmental impacts of AI, and that's the renewable energy reference that I gave at the start of the episode, and Ricardo Schiaffino, who gave a presentation on Perplexity as a research tool. I got some ideas there of how ChatGPT could work for me, and I'm going to tell you about 4 of those use cases. But first, we're going to take a pause for a brief message from Training for Translators. If you've been following Training for Translators for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about the world's most boring and most effective marketing technique, nudging dormant clients. It is so much easier to revive an existing connection than it is to create a new connection, but it's sometimes hard to understand why nudging is so effective and how to make it work for you. To help you get after it, I created the Nudge Kit, a simple set of tools that you can start using right away for your own nudging efforts. To get the Nudge Kit for free, join the Training for Translators mailing list in the sidebar of my blog at trainingfortranslators.com. The download link will be in your subscription confirmation email. Welcome back. And now let's talk a bit about my ChatGPT use cases. Number 1, interpreting prep, where I ask ChatGPT to predict what a speaker might talk about based on the presentation title. When I wrote this blog post, I had the free version of ChatGPT, but I now have the paid version. And I also toggle the option. This is a tip that Nora gave in her Training for Translators class. I also turn off where ChatGPT asks you, do you want to improve the model for everyone? Basically meaning, can we share your stuff with the whole world? I turn that off. I still would not put anything actually confidential into ChatGPT, but if you turn that toggle off, the, improve the model for everyone toggle, then you can just Google how to do that if you don't see it in your ChatGPT settings. Then theoretically, it should not be sharing your stuff. But here's an example. I recently did a conference interpreting assignment where all we got was the title of the speech, which was The Erosion of Trust in Public Institutions in X Country. And the slides, when you get slides from a speaker that are really pretty bare bones and you say to yourself, this person is just going to speak off the cuff, basically. I gave ChatGPT a prompt and said, I'm an interpreter and I have to interpret a speech on the erosion of trust in public institutions in this certain country. Can you think of some recent news events that the speaker might mention? In that case, ChatGPT gave me 3 suggestions, and the speaker actually ended up mentioning 2 of them. Use case number 2, improving presentation titles. I am not the world's most creative writer. as I said in this blog post, I am an upholder. So if any of you follow Gretchen Rubin, I'll try to remember to put a link in the show notes to the Gretchen Rubin 4 Tendencies framework, which is about your productivity tendency. I am someone who is good at getting things done and ticking the box more so than thinking outside the box. I asked ChatGPT to suggest titles for a couple presentations that I'm giving in the next few months. So I would prompt it something like, I'm giving a presentation for beginning translators and interpreters. I usually call it Getting Started as a Freelance Translator or Interpreter. Can you come up with a more interesting title? And in all 4 cases, I used ChatGPT's suggestions. And here I am going to repeat a tip from Nora, which I really loved. And as I mentioned, Nora's going to give a Beyond the Basics of AI presentation for Training for Translators in March. If you aren't on the Training for Translators mailing list, just go to trainingfortranslators.com, click the blog link, and in the sidebar, you can sign up for my mailing list. I promise not to spam you, and then you will find out about that class. A tip that Nora gave when you are thinking about refining your AI prompts, whether you use ChatGPT or, Claude, Perplexity, any other tool, is think about yourself giving instructions to an intern who knows a little bit about your job, but not the specifics. And the example Nora gave, which I thought was something that we can all relate to, is if you say to an intern, get me a coffee, you're probably going to get something that is coffee, but that is not what you had in mind when you said, get me a coffee. Whereas here's what I say when I am giving someone else instructions on how to pour a coffee for me. Hey, someone in my office says, can I get you a coffee? And I say, sure. And they say, how do you like it? And I say, if you could fill the cup about 2/3 full, put in a little more cream than you think that someone would want, and then add 1 sugar, it'll be perfect. So that's how you want to think of your AI prompts, is with that level of specificity. One thing I noticed that Nora did in her class was to always tell ChatGPT or whatever tool a little bit about herself. For example, to say, I'm an English to Spanish conference interpreter and I live in Mexico. Here's what I'm doing. So I thought that was interesting and really helpful. Use case number 3, complicated research questions. So this is what we might call like the search engine on steroids. It's not anything that you can't do yourself, but Riccardo Schiaffino's presentation gave some really interesting examples where an AI tool can save you a ton of time. Just make sure that you check the sources. And all AI tools should give you that option, where you say, can you cite the sources? Can you send me the links where you found that? Riccardo's example was an Italian legal research question. It was something along the lines of, I'm an English to Italian translator, and I wonder if you could give me some information on how the preferences of the child are taken into account in child custody cases in Italy versus child custody cases in the US. And the results were extremely useful. This led me to ask ChatGPT several complicated research questions of my own. For example, I am a dual Switzerland-US citizen, and I had a student in one of my classes who is interested in moving to Switzerland, but she's not a dual citizen. I asked ChatGPT, what are the parameters on non-citizens being self-employed in Switzerland, and do those parameters differ if the person's country of citizenship is an EU member state or not? And again, I found that the results were very helpful and extremely accurate. Use case number 4, rewriting for tone and length. As I said, I stole my daughter's idea for a LinkedIn connection request note. I ask ChatGPT, can you make this connection request under 200 characters, including spaces, and can you make it a little less formal? I'm also a pretty wordy writer, and so I've had ChatGPT condense a lot of things that were too wordy. It also gave me a couple of good wording suggestions for a translation I was working on. For example, I asked it, what's another way of saying seen the light of day? Its top suggestion was come to fruition, which I actually ended up using. So to close out, I would say there is a lot of chaos in the AI landscape right now. And crazily enough, I wrote this blog post less than 2 months ago, and the chaos has only increased. I guess I should have expected that, but there's even more chaos now. And we really don't know what is going to be hype and what is going to be the new normal. I've mentioned before that I really enjoy the daily AI newsletter called The Neuron. A couple of other freelance translation colleagues recommended it to me. I know you're like, I really don't want a daily newsletter, but it takes honestly about 5 minutes to read the parts that you're interested in. And I sort of read it first thing in the morning while I'm drinking my coffee and, coming to my senses. But I think my point here is I had sort of excluded ChatGPT from my mind because I honestly don't find it very helpful for writing or translation. But if that is you, I would encourage you to think about these use cases and see if there are ways that ChatGPT could help you as well. Thanks so much for listening. That brings us to the end of episode 11 of the Training for Translators podcast. And if you'd like more resources for translators and interpreters who want to do better work, earn more money, and enjoy the job more, just hop on over to trainingfortranslators.com. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay. It is technologically hosted on Libsyn. The intro and outro were created and recorded by Shadow Studio, and I make the podcast in Audacity using a Shure MV7 Plus microphone. Thanks, and I'll talk to you in a future episode.
Thanks for listening to the Training for Translators podcast, helping you do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job.
To leave a comment, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast, visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com.
If you enjoy the Training for Translators podcast, please tell your colleagues and friends about it and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app.